a very interesting segment, which is the travel and the entertainment segment. We've got some big brands here, so look forward to some exciting topics being discussed there. First, I call upon Aloke Bajpai from ixigo. Next up, Sachin Kapur from Groupon. Groupon, guys, all the deals that you're enjoying here in Chennai. And of course, last but not the least, Uday Sodhi from Sony. And I take the pleasure of moderating this panel. So yes, we will stick to time, and we have some interesting views coming up. My name is Ameen. I represent Visual IQ. All right, thanks a lot. Thanks, please. All right, good morning, good morning, good morning. Sorry for the delayed start again, but you guys have been a great sport to come back after a late night yesterday. We had a crazy party. So today we have two interesting groups. One is the, as I said, one is the entertainment and one is the travel. We have Groupon, who's dishing out crazy deals to us, which we are all enjoying. So let's get perspectives across. To start things first, let's get a quick introduction in terms of what you've been up to recently, something interesting, and then we'll go around the floor and then we'll get started. Yeah.
So I represent Sony here. We run a digital business within Sony, and we have a mobile app which is called Sony Live. We have another app which is Live Sports. Basically, these two look at entertainment and sports as the genre, and we look at how we can bring a lot of the content that we have and the content library that we have on digital and help people consume. We're seeing in the last few years, since the entire bandwidth and smartphone penetration in the country is moving up, we are seeing significant take-up on mobile entertainment. At a current level, just to give you broad numbers, as a network, we are doing on digital close to about 200 to 250 million video views a month, which is close to about 3 billion video views a year. And that's a fairly large number in terms of consumption. In a month, we're in the region of close to about a little less than 20 million uniques across all our partners that we're working with and Sony Live. So there's a large consumption that we are seeing on mobile video. Mobile video is obviously one of the exciting space, and we're seeing a lot of people getting into that space, and I think there must be a few people here who are looking at mobile video as a category, and we'll take up questions and get into a conversation as we move forward. But I think that's a large category. We believe mobile video would be 50% of all mobile traffic by 2020. It's going to be the single largest contributor and consumer of data traffic across the world, and it's probably the largest and the fastest growing category today.
Sure, thanks. Thank you very much for that. All right.
Yeah, hi, I'm Aloke. I run a travel app called ixigo. We aggregate multiple travel booking providers and recently even transportation booking providers, and we've created apps for each of those categories. Just to tell you why I wanted to be here, 2 years ago, about 10% of our searches and traffic used to come from mobile. Today, it's almost 80%. And apps is almost half of our traffic now. So it's definitely, very exciting times for India, especially because we are emerging as one of the first app-only markets in the world.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I represent Groupon. For all those who probably are not aware of Groupon, we are the largest deal site in the world. From a mobile perspective, it's something that started towards the end of 2013 and the beginning of 2014. We suddenly started seeing this switch in terms of, as everybody said, a very large percentage of our traffic coming in from mobile. Towards the end of 2014, we almost had 60% traffic and about 30% of our transactions coming in from mobile. Also, a very interesting shift that happened was, so when you buy a Groupon and when you redeem it at a merchant outlet, there was to be a much larger time lag. But as the transaction started happening on mobile, that time lag started reducing. Especially over weekends, if people bought a Groupon on a Friday, all those Groupons that were bought between Friday, Saturday and Sunday, close to about 50% of them were redeemed on the same weekend, which was a very, very big insight for us in the sense that it told us that people are becoming increasingly impatient. People are not planning. So even if you're planning that, let's say on a Wednesday you want to have dinner outside, you certainly can't plan that on Wednesday I'm going to have Chinese cuisine outside. That is impossible, especially in today's timeline. So that's what's changing for us. That was the insight for us. And now we're creating a mobile experience that is smart, that tells you what to do, where to do it, where to find what you're looking for. And we're increasing our deal supply so that it becomes more relevant and simple for the end user.
Excellent. Okay. I'm sure, so there is the content that is always started up from the web, right? And there was a certain way this was consumed by the end consumer. As you guys moved to mobile, and obviously we didn't know that mobile is going to be so big in terms of user consumption, what were the changes that you immediately had to bring about to match this new channel? Yeah, so maybe you can start with you.
So, you know, being a global company, it's not very easy to make changes because you're on a technology platform that spans close to about 47 countries. And if one country or a couple of set of countries that are not high up in the revenue table start seeing a very differential behavior, you're not as agile to move. But fortunately for us, that behavior also happened, let's say, in the United States and some of the other European countries. So we started moving extremely towards mobile. The kind of changes that we're bringing in is to our deal content. Because the way we used to write content, and Groupon was known for writing a lot of humorous content, especially on the deals and so on and so forth. So we've reduced the humor bit because we want to focus exactly on what the deal deliverables are, what the fine print is, and all of that is upfront. The images are upfront, so that when you're going through a mobile experience, you first see what you want and what matters from a consumption perspective. And then we've pushed the funny content bit down below.
I think big difference mobile has created is that when you travel, you know, location and context become very important, right? So now that we have, you know, location as well as context in terms of not just past behavior of the user, but also in terms of being able to preempt what the user might want to do. Just to give you an example, like the ixigo Trains app doesn't ask you for any input. It picks up your PNRs from your SMS inbox and starts, you know, helping you know more about delays, cancellations, etc. You know, small things like that are not possible on the web because, you know, it's harder to access email, you know, and it's and when you look at location, the fact that you're landing in a different city and that you know, your normal location was in a different city is a signal that you get that the guy has traveled, right? And basis that, you know, you can change what you're showing on your home screen and start giving him options of places to visit, things to do, etc. in the city that he's just landed in. You know, small things like that were not possible. But I think the biggest change in mindset it has created is that as a company, right from product to technology to marketing, we are thinking of a different demographic, right? Because when you look at the demographic of an average mobile smartphone user in the country, that has changed a lot over the last 3 years. So 3 years ago, most of our demographic was web and largely flight and 3, 4, 5-star hotel bookers. Today, most of that demographic has moved down to trains, buses, budget hotels, people who are actually in a income bracket that's slightly lower than the average bracket before. And then you start thinking of, what can I do to make these people's lives simpler? And you come up with new solutions for that, right? So I think mobile also opens up new opportunities because you're accessing a part of the market that was not accessible before.
So I think from our perspective, there are probably two things that one has to look at, or what we're looking at. One, philosophically, when you're moving from web to mobile, you have to just completely change the way you're thinking. And the whole team and the way you design and the way you put it in front of the consumer, the experience has to be absolutely different. You can't adapt what was on mobile, on web and put it on mobile. It just doesn't work. Some of the times the responsive is just a step in between, but at the end of the day, you have to design and you have to keep the experience for mobile, and you can't keep it for web. So it's an absolutely different ball game. You can't look at it the same way. For us on the entertainment side, I think there is a slightly different angle to the whole thing. You also have to start looking at content differently, and which is different from the way content is handled on the web. On the web, you can still get away with longer content. You can still get away with a different type of content, but on the mobile, you have to start looking at different content. So some of the stuff that we're doing is to do shorter clips. People will need to experience it much better in terms of having 2G or 3G or different types of phones and the form factor and the native video players. So I think there is a significant change in technology. There is a significant change in content. And in terms of design, there is a significant change. So I think all three changes, so therefore it has to be treated like a different animal altogether, and it can't be adapted from what you were doing on web.
Sure, yeah, you bring up an interesting point in terms of design. So any aspiring app developer, right, and when they want to come into any of these spaces, let's say you want to start something in, let's say the entertainment, which is purely informational, you own content, you're throwing it to people to consume. ixigo, for example, where you are coming up with a solution, creating some value out of existing data, right? And a partner-based, where you actually depend on partners to create an application that will be of value. So in all these three cases, I would like to know from the panel, in terms of user experience, there is a very high benchmark that's being set by apps that are coming out today. And for the starter, a person cannot even, does not want to enter the market without giving that certain level of user experience to the user. So if there is a minimum benchmark, I know it's pretty high, what would that be? Yes.
So I think the minimum benchmark, as I think Kunal mentioned in his keynote, is that you need to reduce the number of steps to the final outcome. Whatever is the final outcome, whether it's a search result, whether it's a transaction, whether it's just finding or consuming content. I think the first step is to really see that how can because the mobile user is highly impatient. He or she needs to get to what they're looking for immediately. So whenever you're thinking of design, think of outcome. What's the outcome and how can the user get there as soon as possible?
I agree. And I think like I said before, the more you can use predictive analytics to say that here's what he probably wants to do next at this point in the funnel, given his past behavior, you can automatically, bring those options up and basically reduce the time spent. The other thing is simplicity, especially given that, the new users getting added on smartphones today are all coming from sort of a middle of the pyramid to bottom of the pyramid audience, right? Keeping things really simple from a communication standpoint and from a navigation standpoint is extremely critical because we can, and that's where to the earlier point that Kunal made, that don't just copy experiences that somebody else has made, in the rest of, that approach will fail here because some of those things are just too complicated for the average guy from Kanpur or Patna or, you know, Bhopal, because the guy has never used this thing before, right? So I think you got to think of it from their point of view and when you design and also test it and validate it with those sort of audiences and not just with people sitting around you in your office.
All right.
So from the entertainment and from content consumption perspective, let's look at the numbers. There are 60 to 80 million smartphones out there. The number is supposed to grow. It will become double next year, maybe double after that. If the next lot of people have to consume your content, a lot of it would be consumed by people who don't understand English, don't understand, you know, the way a lot of people who are currently writing content, they will not understand it. So my theory on this is that keep it as visual as possible and as simplistic as possible. If you are creating an app which is for the entertainment category or for content consumption, keep it visual in nature, keep very little textual content, get people to just have one click to be able to view the content or to get to the next level and just go through it fairly simply. I think that's the thing that I would focus on.
Sure. And just to sum up, one is figuring out simple steps towards going there. Second is figuring out who your audience is, testing it out. And third is keeping it pretty visual. So there it is, guys, for you. I mean, to definitely keep these things in mind when you get into app development in any of these verticals. Now, we've seen content creation, we've seen user experience. The next is something pretty close to me, which is the analytics part. Web itself provides a lot of ways to measure what is that we are throwing it back at the user. The moment we go mobile, we are adding two more dimensions, as I said, location and context, right? How is this addition of dimensions with all the existing metrics adding to the smartness of the app or the evolution of smartness in the app? Is there any instances that you could throw that we saw this data and then we ended up taking that data and then introduced a new feature in the app so that the user is benefited? Any examples across the panel? Yeah.
I think I can name one example. So when we looked at the hotels segment and we looked at the budget hotels category, we realized that a large number of budget hotels are still not being sold online. And it's very hard to even find details about them, photos about them. And most of those bookings are happening either as a walk-in or call, right? So one of the things we did in our app, based on the insight that we got out of our data, because we saw a lot of people also clicking and reading stuff, but not really going on to book them. And the insight was that a lot of people actually want to talk to these hotels before they book them, right? They have questions related to where are you located? Can I haggle the price with you? I want to get more confidence about it before I book because this is a non-branded hotel. So based on that insight, we actually, and based on the data that we saw, we said, let's do an experiment. We actually introduced a call button, in our app for all our hotels. And that actually improved our conversion rates. And for the hotels which were not bookable online, that improved the ability for the consumer to actually call them up and just complete that booking. That's a learning for the Indian market. I mean, the Indian consumer is so different from, let's say in the US, nobody would think about this, right? Because who would want to book a hotel, on a call? But I think in India, you don't have to fight the existing consumer behavior, you have to adapt to it, right? So you're not going to say that this is what worked everywhere, that's why it works here, but you realize that 90% of the people actually do want to talk to the hotel before they book it. So you should simplify that and provide for that, right? So we actually did that, and we are now doing, a few thousand calls a day to hotels, to facilitate these bookings.
So the mobile ecosystem actually throws up so much data that at times you get scared by what you see. If you're an app, if you're in the technology team, you even would know. Forget about location, forget about time of day. You would even know if your user is lying down or sitting up while he's accessing your app. What can you do with that data is something that you need to figure out either as marketeers or as technology guys, right? So one of the important things that we saw was, about talking about location. Where were people buying Groupon vouchers before, when we were not so strong on mobile, to now. And they're unbelievably close to the merchant establishments. So when they're reaching a mall, when they're out there, when they're traveling in a car, so they're buying all of this on the move. Earlier, all purchases were happening either, you know, at the office or at the house and so on and so forth. But from a data perspective, it's unbelievable amount of data. The kind of events that you can track, what is the purchase behavior, what is the exit point, what is the entry point, it's what are the other sort of activities is the individual doing at that point of time, how you know, how active he or she is on social. So there is unbelievable amount of data that the mobile ecosystem throws at you. One of the important aspects of this is how you communicate on mobile, is your push notifications, how you can tailor make your push notifications based on the entire amount of data that is getting thrown up to you. So if tomorrow we would want to get to a stage that I would want to recommend an individual that, hey, you've not bought you know, a Chinese restaurant voucher for the past 1.5 months, and I think now, as per your data usage, I know that today is the day you love Chinese. So that is where we would want to get to.
So an interesting thing that we've figured out, or we've been watching over the last few months, has been, when do people consume content the most? While a lot of content consumption happens during the day, but it's interesting that the content consumption starts moving up the minute you're traveling. So whenever people are traveling, there's a lot of content consumption, and a lot of content consumption happens in the late evenings. So come 6:37, we start seeing people, we can make out people are now leaving office. It's time to spend an hour in the bus or the train or wherever, or in the car, and they're consuming content. And then post dinner is when we see a lot of content consumption. Until late in the evening or late in the night, we're seeing content consumption. So it's an interesting one. And the first half of the day is a fairly dull part of the day. So we try and see, you know, what kind of, or when is the free time that people get, when are they doing it, and therefore a lot of our marketing communication and the way we stack up our shows on the site and the app depend a lot on what they're doing at that point in time. So a lot of changes and a lot of stuff that happens in communication happens later in the evening for us.
Excellent. I'll have one question because I'm showing, getting a time's up slide there. I'll have one question from the audience. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Aman. Since yesterday, I've been hearing a lot about app and mobile for consumers. But what we are trying to look up is create such facility for enterprise and SMB in terms of their support system. So I would like to know kind of, I hear the kind of SMEs in India is so huge. And some app which can support in terms of the data that can give to their, for their business decision on their support system. So will there be a market potential, or how successful it can be? Like, will an app do a job? An app can do a job, but will that make a sense for the business?
So, from an, I don't know if I'll be able to answer your question exactly from an SME's perspective, but I'll give you experience that of we working with local businesses. So if you can, you know, relate that to, let's say, a restaurant owner or a spa owner or a salon owner. So we, when Groupon came into India, we were perhaps one of the first companies to have not only a consumer app, but also a merchant app. What the merchant app does is it allows the merchant to paperlessly redeem vouchers that have been bought on Groupon. And that's not the only functionality. It also gives you your complete analytics in terms of from Groupon, whether you've got your existing customers coming back, whether you're getting new customers, how many people have bought the deal, how many people have redeemed. So it is almost like an analytics dashboard. In the US, we've gone one step further, and we've also given devices to a lot of these small businesses, whether they're restaurants, spas, salons, all the businesses that work with Groupon, where they can track customers. So when a customer buys a Groupon and is entering the establishment, the merchant actually knows the history of the the customer, can actually tailor make services and give specific, can cater to the specific preferences of this customer, which was something that only, larger organizations could do with expensive ERP and CRM systems. This is something which is now possible via mobile technology.
Maybe one last question. You're good? All right, thanks a lot, panel. There was some interesting insights. And of course, there's a lot to take away in terms of how do you go about creating apps in each of the sectors and figuring out what the analytics should be supporting them. Thanks a lot, and big round of applause for the panel.